So for anyone who just trickled in, welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking all about audience segmentation for nonprofits. So I'm Isa Hasty. I'm the Senior Content Marketing Manager here at Feather, and I like to help nonprofits kind of understand how to leverage digital marketing and digital marketing tactics to better hit their goals and make better decisions when it comes to their marketing. So segmentation is a huge part of good multi-channel marketing, and so that's what we're going to be getting into today. And I do work closely with a lot of our customers and kind of hear from them what works on a day-to-day basis and what works for their campaigns. And so I like to try to bring some of that into these webinars. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to my colleague, David, to introduce himself.
Thanks, Isa. Hey, everybody. Hope you're having a great day today. I am David Troll, and I am a lead digital campaign strategist here at Feather. I've been working with Feather for the past 3 years, and I've had the privilege to work with almost every type of client vertical that we have. I specialize in nonprofits, but have also worked with trade shows, associations, and credit unions. And one of my strengths is I really focus on an omni-channel approach. So I'm really excited to be here today about audience segmentation and hopefully give you guys some tips from the Feather pros here.
Yes, super excited to dive in. So quick agenda, like I said earlier, we're going to be sending out the recording and the slide deck tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that in your email inbox. And if you have any questions along the way, feel free to drop those in the chat, and we're going to sort of check the chat throughout this presentation and answer questions as we go. So definitely feel free to drop anything in there, and yeah, let's get some engagement in the chat. So quick agenda items. So we're going to be starting off by talking about what segmentation is and why you need it, just some kind of context settings, defining some terms just so we're all on the same page. We're going to be talking about some of the misconceptions around segmentation, like I said earlier, that might be kind of stopping you from feeling like it's easy and accessible to get started with. And then we'll talk about some specific ways that you can think about segmenting your audience. And then we'll get into a couple of best practices that we use when we run campaigns and we've seen a lot of customers succeed with when it comes to segmentation and just driving better results from campaigns. And then I think the best part will be at the end, which is just showing some real examples of campaigns that Feather customers have run and the segments that they've used to get super targeted in those campaigns. So what is segmentation? So this is basically, and like I said, a lot of you are already doing segmentation. I'm sure all of you know what it means, but just to kind of set some context here. So this is basically just the process of breaking up audiences into unique groups or segments so that you can serve them more relevant and personalized outreach, content, marketing, all of that. And so, for example, a one-time donor obviously shouldn't be seeing the same content or messaging or ask as a long-time volunteer. Those are two completely different people with different needs and different contributions to your organization. And so they should be seeing messaging that reflects that. Similarly, if you're an association, an existing member requires totally different communications than a non-member or a first-time website visitor. So you really want to be thinking about all of the people that you're talking to and even people that you don't know yet who you'd like to be in your audience as having different needs and different motives to be involved with you. And you want to sort of understand what those are and speak to those needs in your marketing. So why should we segment our audiences? So this obviously, kind of goes without saying, but relevancy is more important than reach. So if you're reaching thousands of people with the wrong message and it doesn't resonate, who cares how many people you reached, right? But if you're reaching a smaller group with messaging that really speaks to them and they act on it, they donate, they join your organization, that's impactful, right? So there was a time when sending the same newsletter to everybody worked perfectly well. People didn't really expect personalization. And so nonprofits and other organizations in general just kind of sent mass messages to their whole community because there wasn't really an alternative. And so nowadays, your donors, your supporters, your members, they're all being offered curated, personalized experiences with basically every brand that they interact with, online. And we all have algorithms that are serving up super tailored experiences and recommendations when we're online shopping and browsing social media. And so we just have come to expect personalization in this way. So you want to kind of get on this level and provide that tailored experience to your supporters too, because that's the thing that's going to really cut through the noise, resonate with them, cause them to make that donation, sign up to volunteer. But at the same time, they're being bombarded with lots of messages. And so you want to make sure that you're being strategic about how and when you're reaching them too, so that you kind of don't, just fall by the wayside. And so segmentation is a way to do this. And so when you create segments that receive their own version of communications and you automate things so that people are getting the right thing at the right time for them, it's going to be more impactful, and you can really speak directly to each group and encourage them to engage with you, but also to trust you as a source of relevant and useful content, and somebody who's going to have an offer that is actually relevant and appealing to them. And then just to kind of dive a little deeper on that, some specific reasons for segmentation. So obviously every nonprofit should be doing some degree of segmentation, since all donors and supporters and members don't have the same needs, like we said. But if you have a particularly large audience, this could be a reason to really, get into segmentation, because if you think about trying to create, the larger your audience, the harder it's going to be to create one message that resonates with everybody. So if you have a lot of people that you're trying to reach and you're trying to think of, for example, a subject line that is going to somehow speak to everybody's needs and interests, that's going to be really hard compared with creating smaller groups and coming up with messaging that resonates with, the common interest of that group. Another factor might be budget. So if you're operating with a lower budget, which we know a lot of nonprofits are, you want to put your dollars to good use. And one way to do that is to invest them in those more highly targeted campaigns that are going to convert at higher rates. So this is, creating meaningful segments, tailoring your messaging, your timing, your ad creatives, everything, subject lines, so that those campaigns perform at a higher rate and convert at a higher rate. And then lastly, segmentation can be super powerful if you're trying to achieve specific goals. So David's going to get into some specific examples in a few minutes, but let's say we're trying to drive event attendance. You might run an email mapping campaign to last year's attendees. You might create another segment of people who've visited your event page once, and then another segment who've visited it more than 3 times, because those are different levels of intent, right? And then you would also have new segments of potential attendees from like audience expansion campaigns that you're running, and the list goes on. So any goal that you have, whether it's acquiring new donors, engaging past donors, current members, promoting a program or something like that, you'll hit that goal faster if you're paying attention to the different groups of people that you want to target and speaking to them in ways that are personalized and tailored to what they're actually interested in and who they are. So let's dive in. Let me just check the chat real quick. Probably aren't any new questions. Yeah, so what would you classify as a small, medium, large audience? David, would you like to speak on that?
Yeah, it's so funny because we were talking about this when we were prepping for this call. It's really up to your organization. For me, it's like we have a slide coming up on cold versus warm audience. And for a lot of people, cold means they've never seen an ad. They've never seen your logo. They know nothing about the organization. For other people, cold audience might mean that they've been to your website only one time and we don't have their email address. So like it really is based on the organization, like how you're going to classify the type of segment you're looking at. For me though, like a small audience is going to be an audience under 1,000. A medium audience, I'm looking at like 1,000 to 5K. And then like a mass audience, I'm pretty much targeting everybody above that. So if I was looking at like a full website audience, that would be, large size. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. And then there's another question here. So if you're getting hyper specific, how do you determine what group to segment? And would this be around developing niche campaigns for smaller audiences to get higher conversion rates? So your audience might have different campaign groups that get segmented. Yeah, we're going to get into some very specific ways to segment based on web traffic, web activity, email engagement, things like that. So hopefully that section, which is coming up in a few minutes, will help answer that question. But if not, we will come back to it. Drop a note if it doesn't. Okay, so let's get into just some of these misconceptions around segmentation, because I think that a lot of nonprofits struggle with getting started with some parts of marketing that feel daunting or complex, and they can actually be easier than you think and very helpful and actually simplify your marketing sometimes. But if it feels like something that you're not familiar with or it feels intense, you might avoid getting into it. And so I think there's some misconceptions around segmentation in particular. So if you basically, plain and simple, if you have an audience, you have segments. You just might not have identified them yet. And maybe you've identified some major segments, like a lot of those people who responded to the poll earlier, who have 2 or 3 segments that they're working with. That's a good start. But there's more, there's definitely more. And so there's plenty of ways to do this. And you can start by looking at trends in demographic data that you have in your CRM on your audience. You can look at your web traffic data, who's visiting what pages, how many times, things like that, to see like what's motivating one donor compared to another, what pages they're visiting. And so just a few things to consider as you are identifying those segments are, how are people engaging with you? Is it, a new donor or a new member versus like a long-term donor, a loyal, member who's been with you for many years? Are there different demographics within your donor base or your member base with unique needs? Do you want to engage differently with different age groups? Maybe you want to speak specifically to parents about a program that you're promoting. Or maybe you want to target people in a certain geographic area, like a high income neighborhood, if you're looking for big ticket donors or something like that. And then, what are they actually interested in? So do some members care more about different programs or services? Do donors and volunteers have different motives for their contributions? And if so, what are they? And how can you leverage that information in your communications? And towards the end, we're going to give, like I said, a lot of examples of real Feather campaigns and segmentation ideas. But one of them is going to be about actually running pop-up surveys on your website to get a little bit more insight on what your website visitors are there to find, and actually asking them, getting from the source, from the person, what their reason is for signing up to volunteer, or maybe visiting your donate page. You say, why are you here? What are you interested in? And so Feather offers a really cool tool that allows you to actually show those pop-up surveys and get that information. And then you can turn those responses into segments that you can then target with personalized messaging based on what they told you that they're interested in. So there's lots of cool tools that help make segmentation just very easy. So we'll get into that. And then another misconception that I've heard and read about is that segments are just for email marketing. And I think people don't realize that you can segment across multiple channels. And so, any information that you have on your contacts is something that you can use to segment by and target by. And so you might, run a retargeting campaign, like regardless of whether you have someone's email, you might run a retargeting campaign to stay on the radar of people who have visited your donate page in the last month, even if you don't have their email. You might run an email mapping campaign to somebody who has disengaged. So people whose email you do have and who you've been emailing over time, but maybe they're disengaged or unsubscribed from your emails, and you're like, okay, email isn't the way to reach them. This might be a segment of people that you want to target with a new ad campaign, and you can run an email mapping campaign to show them ads to get them to re-engage with you. Because maybe in some cases they're just having email fatigue, or they just are tired of receiving emails, but they will notice you in other places. And if you show up as they're browsing the web with digital ads, that's a great way to kind of nudge them and remind them and stay top of mind without bombarding their inbox if they're clearly showing that the inbox is not where they want to be, engaging with you. So yeah, cross-channel segmentation is important. And then I think this is the big one, is that this idea that segmentation is this like very advanced tactic that requires a lot of time and effort and maybe budget, and it feels maybe kind of inaccessible or daunting. And so on the contrary, sending to smaller segments is actually sometimes easier than trying to send one bulk email to your whole audience, simply because it's easier to understand what to say to a smaller group with common interests than it is to come up with a subject line or ad copy that's supposed to appeal to your entire audience. And then segmentation is also a really easy way. So not only is it easy to get started with, but it's also an easy way to level up your marketing. You're going to start seeing better engagement, better conversions, better results. And so you might feel that you actually become a more advanced marketer through employing segmentation. And you can always start small and grow from there. And I think one of the things that I've heard from customers, again, is like once they get started with segmenting their audience, it becomes almost this like fun, addictive thing where it's like, oh, cool, like we're getting such engagement with this group of people. I'm going to go do something similar with, another group. And so kind of seeing like if you run a targeted campaign to people who've visited your donate page a certain number of times and you see that there's traction there, you might do something similar with your events page or, a program page. And so I think there's a lot of yeah, cool, fun, like ways that you can play around with segmentation once you have all the data and understand how to use it. And your marketing platform should make it easy to create and target these segments. So we'll get into that a little more later too, but you want to have a marketing platform that lets you kind of, add filters, look at your audience, and then easily create segments based on whatever combination of criteria you want to look at. And so, yeah, you want to have the right platform that makes it feel easy and automated and seamless. Cool. So let's get into some of those specific ways that you can actually segment your audience. So we'll pass it over to David for this part.
Thank you. And actually, I wanted to check in on some of the messages. It looks like we have some good questions.
Yeah.
Here. So, Allie, welcome. Hello. Hope you're having a nice day. She's asking, can you review how you tailor messaging for older audiences? That is our toughest reach, even with mail, calls, and emails. Whereas this call isn't about creative messaging, I hear you loud and clear. I think using programmatic and display is absolutely the right channel to reach older audiences, as well as probably like some meta campaigns, because we know that's where they hang out. Messaging for me is in nonprofits, it's all about the story. It's all about the impact. Everybody loves a good story. So you have to leave them with the cliffhanger, the scroll stopper. You have to find some way to get people to stop what they're doing and think. If you can do that, the marketing's done its job.
Yeah.
So that's a great question. I could talk for hours about creative messaging, but hopefully that maybe at least points you in the right direction.
And I think another thing is that people really like to understand where their money is going. And so wherever you can show that dollar impact or like tell that emotional story that relates back to where people's contributions are actually going, I think people really like to see that, So working that into the narrative and reinforcing the idea that people are donating to a cause and the money is actually going somewhere and being put to good use, working that into your ads and your emails, I think is very powerful because people like transparency and authenticity.
Yeah. And big fonts, say less.
Yes.
Is important. Like for instance, 500 meals donated in Houston last month.
Yeah.
Like big numbers, like make it very easy to read. If you're dealing with the older audiences, sometimes that's an issue with smaller ads.
Mm-hmm.
A few more questions and we'll get it back into the presentation. How do you target someone who's visited your website when we don't have their email? That's what pixeling is for. And in Feather terminology, we call it the Feather super pixel. So that pixel fires and creates a cookie every time someone visits your website. And that's a way to continuously move them through the marketing funnel and reserve them ads or retarget them. Would email mapping be a way to reconcile, in your way, our CMM records with Feather? Kind of. The best way to get your CRM talking to Feather, and we actually have a slide for this later, is using like a Zapier link where you can upload your records from your CRM into Feather. If you have Salesforce or Razor's Edge, NXT, those are like other ways that we've integrated with different CRMs to pull in your email records into Feather. But email mapping is pretty simple. You upload an email list as long as it's over 2,500 people, and then Feather goes out there and matches those emails to cookies and serves them ads.
Yeah. So no emails are sent as part of an email mapping campaign. You're simply using the email as sort of the identifier for the person, and then you're serving them ads.
Yep, correct. Cool. Keep the questions coming, guys. Really love it. Let's try to stump us today on the call. All right. I think we alluded a little bit to this earlier, but when you're segmenting your audience, it's the first question is determining what type of audience they are. Are they warm or are they cold? Because that's going to determine how you're building the ad and how you're writing the ad. So simply put, cold audiences probably don't have any relationship with your organization whatsoever, whereas a warm audience has some kind of relationship. And now this is that part that's gray. How that some part kind of relationship looks is different to everybody. It's on a spectrum. So maybe they've just seen one ad and that's warm. For me, that's not warm enough. Seeing one ad, like I need them to see 5 ads, 10 ads before I consider them to be warm. And really for me, I need them to take one more step to be warm. So they have to see 5 ads and click to my website. Now you're warm. Now let's change the message. So that's kind of like the differentiator there. If they get to a donate page, that's definitely warm, and probably one of the segments that we'll talk about a lot, which is donation dropout or cart abandonment.
Yep. And another thing is, like, even within warm, like David said, it's a spectrum, and you might consider anyone whose email you have to be a warm lead, right? But then there's a difference between someone whose email you have who has never been to an event or who has never made a donation versus someone whose email you have and they're a longtime donor. And so it's always about getting as specific as you can and really continuing to drill down and see, like, who is each individual person and what is their relationship with our brand, right?
Great. Thank you. So here's some segments. When we're building our plan, this is just another way to think about it. We're going to talk just based on retargeting now. So this is based on website activity. I think of it in 3 buckets. Is it your full website? Are they doing one more step? Are they visiting a high intent page, whether that's an about us page, an impact story, a blog post, a donation page, annual report? Maybe they're looking to volunteer. Any combination of those things, you would want to tailor a message specifically to those triggers of where they're going and what they're doing, right? And then most importantly, are they making it to a donation page? And that's when we would serve them a donation dropout or a cart abandonment ad. Getting lots of good questions. We'll get to you guys at the end. Location's another one of the areas that I really focus in on. It's one of the battles that I have when I'm talking to a lot of my clients. And this one's very based on budget. Like, we all want donors from around the world, right? But sometimes we might be limited by budget. So we have to make certain kind of condolences to figure out where it's best to fit our money. So with that, we have tools like a mobile geofencing or historical geofencing campaign where we can pick a point on the earth and put a perimeter around it. The cool thing about Feather is we can get as zeroed in as 1 kilometer. Meta used to be a little bit better, but now Meta, you can only get 15 miles around a point now. So if you're looking at really hyper-targeted targeting, getting hyper-targeted is the best option for you guys. Also, like, it's good to put a geofilter. So if you're a local food bank, for instance, and you want to just target your own food pantries, using those cities that they're located in could be a really good use case. But on the second part of that, maybe excluding those locations could also be viable as well, because, you have to be just very kind of sensitive to your audience. You don't want to always be advertising where you're located in certain circumstances. Cart abandonment, donation abandoners. If one campaign's going to work for you in one segment, you come away from this meeting, this is the one that's probably going to return you a favorable CPA and make your board happy. These are people who have made it to the donation page and for some reason they have not donated, right? So you have to have a pixel set up to get this to work. These are absolutely your most warm audience and most likely to convert. And the cool thing about this, these are super hyper-targeted audiences. Usually they're the smallest in size when I'm like segmenting my website traffic. So it's pretty common that these are like between 1,000. If you're a big 501c3, maybe a couple thousand. The good news here, you don't have to spend quite as much to get the reach. So for me, it's all about audience saturation. If you're one of my clients or you're in my portfolio, I talk about audience saturation a lot. My first goal, let's reach as many people as we can. The next goal is let's get those views per user up. With a cart abandonment, it's fairly cheap to get 15 to 25 views per user, which is very saturated. And what usually it takes nowadays to get someone to convert. First-time donors. So let's talk about ways to reach first-time donors. I think first, Feather has a couple different tools that we use. We've already talked about geofencing a little bit. So location on the earth, whether it's a big basketball game, to anybody out there who's a Boston fan, congratulations. A hockey game, if you're a Florida Panthers fan, we got another big one tonight. An affinity audience, if you're talking about the who, what, where, when, whether you're looking at people who are tracked donors, people with income levels over 200,000, people that are 55 and up, people that have a certain kind of job, people that do certain kind of things. That's an affinity audience. If you're looking to do search keyword audiences, that's based around keyword mapping. So pretty self-explanatory. Or we have lookalike, just to go out and find people that are similar to your website audience. It's pretty cool. I wanted to announce this. If you're a current Feather client, we'll actually be launching an email drip campaign coming up soon. Should be out in the next couple months. So if you're a first-time donor and you wanted to put somebody on a 4-month email drip campaign where after they make that first donation, they get a story from the CEO, an impact report, and then you wait. And then at the end of the 4-month drip cycle, we send them a recurring donation ask. Those are other tools that you can have to segment your audience and make sure that your tech stack is automating that process of communication. Yes.
Another cool thing is that with affinity campaigns, you can get super specific about the groups that you are looking for. So I know one of our users ran a Giving Tuesday campaign last year that was a holiday book drive, basically. And with her affinity campaign, she was able to target specifically people who had shopped at Barnes & Noble and other bookstores. And so you can really, really hone in and get super specific on people's purchase history, search history, things like that, to create a very targeted segment of people who have exhibited the behavior that you're looking for. So lots of really cool data to pull from there.
There's thousands and thousands of lists in the Feather platform. So yeah, so one of the cool things or important things to note about segmentation, I think, is not only who you include, but who you exclude. So I wanted to point on that. One thing that I do regularly in my campaign plans is it's all about being sensitive to a first-time donor. So after someone makes a donation, I want to make sure to exclude them for 90 days after that donation so they're not seeing any ads. I don't want the ads to rub them the wrong way. I also am not ready to ask them for a donation again. So it's just a way for the platform to help you be sensitive to your new first-time donors.
And Vanessa, yes, you can use Feather to define those affinity groups. That's a campaign type in Feather, affinity targeting. So you can pull from third-party data that exists in Feather to select those groups, choose from all of the different options that there are there, and create those groups within the platform.
We have some really good questions about de-anonymizing data and third-party cookies going away. So I can't wait to get to those.
Yeah, we can maybe talk about those at the end of this section.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is a good place to do it.
Cool.
Let's talk about lapsed donors. So you can use different campaign types like email mapping, which we've talked about for lapsed donors, or single send email campaigns to reach out to those audience members. But you know, that's great. You send an email to a lapsed donor, they don't open it, they don't click on it. The cool thing about retargeting and a tool like Feather is I can then take that audience based on those triggers. So let's say my activity would be did not open an email. I can add that to then a retargeting campaign and manually move them into the next step of the funnel to try to re-engage them, or to build a specific campaign for those people because for some reason or another, they've become disengaged with the brand. And that is one of the hardest things to do, is to bring them back in. So is it a story? Is it an appeal? It's probably not asking for a donation though. You have to be a little bit more crafty, I think, in your approach to make that work. So conversely, you can also exclude those lapsed audiences from your campaigns as well. Cool. Moving forward, we'll talk a little bit about big ticket donors. This is something that we alluded to earlier as well. So one way to get your data into Feather is you can either use Zapier, Salesforce, Razor's Edge, NXT, and you can actually pull all of your information into Feather, create tags, which are essentially like a way to organize things into segments. So you could tag somebody as a macro donor and then create a campaign that's specifically for those donors, or exclude those donors because you don't want them seeing an ad for a new donor acquisition campaign. Reasons why you might retarget donors is you want to build a relationship. You want to showcase that donor impact, or you want to ask for a recurring gift. I talked about a drip campaign earlier about like how somebody becomes a first-time donor and you want to build that relationship. You want to thank them. Maybe it's having an automated email to go out 24 hours after the donation to thank them first. That's important. Then after that, they get a monthly email from the CEO, a monthly email about the impact report, a story appeal, and then you ask them for a donation.
Yeah, and a huge part of keeping donors engaged year-round and turning one-time donors into recurring donors is just to show up and stay on their radar, but without constantly asking for a donation, right? And a really good way to do that is just to sort of continually tell your story, showcase that impact, remind them where their dollars went, and just be kind of in the background reminding them of your cause and the impact without, asking constantly for them to give money, because that just won't, that gets annoying. You can't just constantly be asking for donations. But telling the story, showcasing the impact, things like this can be really helpful. And everybody wants to know where their money is going. Like we said earlier, that's a huge theme with, trying to appeal to younger generations of donors. There's a lot more emphasis, I think, on transparency and authenticity with like Gen Z and millennials. They're kind of like, should I believe that this brand is doing what they say they do? And then, big ticket donors too, probably they're donating so much money, they want to make sure that that money is going somewhere. And so I think at the end of the day, everybody wants to trust that they're investing in something worthwhile and trustworthy. And so being able to show that sort of year round through your ads and through your emails is a great way to keep people engaged and trusting your organization.
Yeah, exactly. Let's take a break right now. We have some great questions that we can get to before we move forward to best practices and examples. Isa, do you want to lead off?
Yeah. So for segmenting in social media, would it be prudent to have different messaging across different platforms? So we'll actually get into that in a second. It's best to keep your messaging consistent across platforms. Part of running good, effective multi-channel marketing is to reach people across different mediums and different platforms and show up wherever they are online, but with cohesive messaging so that they're connecting your brand to your messaging in all of those places. So you don't want to be showing up with certain like color and style and wording in one place and then a completely different sort of vibe on a different platform. You want people to connect to you, and that's what creates that sort of cohesive customer journey as they become familiar with you, and that you stay on their radar with something that feels cohesive. And so it doesn't have to be the exact same messaging across platforms. I mean, do whatever you find works for your organization in terms of email versus ads, but you definitely want people to know that it's you wherever they're seeing you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'll just back up on Meta. I've launched a ton of Meta campaigns in my career. Video. I think that's the one thing I almost always see better results when using video on Meta. The only difference that I do is for programmatic and display, I'll include a button, and usually on Meta campaigns, the ad won't have a button because they already have a button natively built into their ad platform. Okay. Another question, we'll start from the bottom and work our way up. In order to activate a drip campaign, we need the pixel active with our donation system, correct? In a perfect world, yes. Ways that you could get around that is if you can have a thank you page. You have to have somewhere where the pixel fires, right? So if you can have a confirmation page or a thank you page after the donation takes place, and you have a lot of email records in Feather already, you can do this by sending more emails in Feather, by having them fill out a form fill, like a newsletter sign up. Maybe it's a petition, maybe it's a conversation pop-up like Isa's going to cover later. That's going to I'm going to circle back around now to a saucy question. Will segmentation still be viable if Google continues with getting rid of third-party cookies? It'll be more difficult, that's for sure. But it's really important right now, and I've been preaching this to my clients. You have to de-anonymize as much third-party cookies and the first-party cookies as possible right now. Cookies go offline after about 120 days. People clear their cache, they clear their browser, whatever it may be. So it's important to keep refreshing those cookies and make sure that you have a really solid, reachable first-party data list in your tech stack, whatever that might be. those audiences are going to be much easier to retarget if third-party cookies do go offline. They've been talking about this for years, and as long as you partner with like the major ad platforms like Feather does, which is the Googles, the Metas, LinkedIn, whoever else it may be, Yahoo, Bing, they're building their own systems to reach out to these audiences. I don't foresee it being something that will just totally get rid of this. There's still so many marketing dollars out there that the big three are going to find ways to get after it. But great question. De-anonymize your data. Get as many emails into your tech stack as possible.
That's kind of connected to this other question. So we have over 25,000 folks who visited our homepage, but otherwise haven't de-anonymized. Is there a best practice action that would help us capture emails and info for these folks? If they're a cold audience, are they likely to engage with a quick survey? Yeah, so like David just said, a quick survey, a petition or something like that, like something slightly below an ask for a donation, because obviously that's the goal, right? But you can't expect everybody to want to donate, and that's not the only way that you can get somebody to fill out a form and give you their email. So, maybe you're trying to get people to subscribe to your email newsletter. Maybe you have an event coming up that you're promoting and you want people to sign up for that. And that, like a local community event, that's a way to get people's emails. A petition about something meaningful that your organization's involved with, like those sort of smaller asks that might really resonate with people and cause them to give you that information without having to make a bigger contribution upfront.
Yeah. Awesome. Great questions, everybody. We're going to jump into some real life examples pretty soon, so we want to make sure we save some time for that.
Ooh, let's get into it.
All right, so some best practices. I am a huge UTM link supporter. We have in Feather a tracked link builder. I always tell people I love to bucket my external channel campaigns. I want to know if it's a Google Grant campaign, because Google Grant it's great, but it's filled with traffic that might not make for the best donor. Because it's low quality traffic. So I want to either be able to include or exclude certain campaigns from my segmentation. So it's great to be able to bucket your Google campaigns, your email button clicks, your Meta campaigns, your LinkedIn campaigns, whatever you might be doing externally. Just make sure you have some way to track them so that I could say retarget UTM equals XXXXX. Yes, so we talked about excluding is just as important as including. If you're including full website audience, it might be good to then exclude your high intent pages. So you're just getting that cold traffic. And because you're going to already serve that high intent campaign with a different message down the funnel. In terms of best practices, I pretty much always use a 30 to 100 day look back window for retargeting campaigns. If I have to make a call, it's always 30. I will, if I'm limited by budgets, if I'm limited by time, and e-commerce and everything you do, people are most likely to convert if they've recently been on your website. So if you have to make a play, go with that. If you're looking for maximum reach, maximum potential, budget's not a problem, up your look back window to 120 days. We also talk about like visits to websites. So this is based on cookies. If somebody's been to your website more than 5 times, they're super warm. Whereas if they've only been there under 3, they're probably brand new to the websites. That might take a different message to reach out to them, to get them to come back and to learn more. All right.
Some of those real life examples.
Yay. All right, so we're gonna start. We've been talking about bucketing your audience a lot during this call. We're gonna do it based on cold audience and then warm audience later. So here I have some real life examples. This is from one of my personal clients, Camp Eagle. Camp Eagle, if you're on the call, thank you. This is full website traffic for an unknown audience. This means the email address does not exist in Feather, with a 30-day look back window. You can see the total people is over 1 million that this client has cookied over their time at Feather. That's a lot. To retarget an audience of $1 million, you better be talking about $10,000 for this one campaign. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure that we're targeting just the people who are most recently there and people who we do not have an email on record for. So it's a way for me to move this audience through the funnel to get them to come back to the website. All right. Keep rolling. This one is about how ads and email, when they work together, it's just more powerful. So let's say somebody received an email, but the times they've been seen or been cookied is under 3 in the past 120 days. So this is a way for you to engage your email audience that is just not engaging with your brand. So you can take this same audience here. You can see it's pretty large. It's about 15,000 people, and then add it to a retargeting campaign to move them manually through the funnel. One of the things I like to do too is bucket my audiences based on if they've been influenced by a marketing campaign. So I start with campaign exists. The activity type is clicking a link on your website. And then I'm looking for people where the email does not exist in Feather. So you can see this is a very specific audience. We're looking for people that have been marketed to that are a little bit warm. They've clicked the link on page, but for some reason they have just not donated. They have not signed up for a newsletter. So it's a very specific cold audience, but nonetheless, they are still cold. So it takes maybe a little bit of an extra lift here to get them over the finish line.
Yeah, let's pause here for a minute. If everyone could drop in some of your go-to segments or some of the easiest segments you've found to activate. So for those of you who earlier on said you're doing more than 10 segments, maybe drop in one of those sort of like more specific ones that you work with. But we'd love to hear answers from everyone in terms of what you're finding is working for you. What are some of your favorite ones to play around with?
Hopefully some of you are willing to share some of your secrets.
Yeah, don't be shy.
Lapsed donors.
Okay.
Yes. Event attendees. Yes, there's a great, yeah.
Yep, it's a big one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's cool to see people are doing the things that we're talking about here.
Big cities. Yep. Love it.
Yep. People who've attended a lunch and learned but have not donated. Yeah, that's a great one.
So maybe like excluding local versus out of town. So you could exclude your local audience on a big retargeting campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you guys. This is incredible. I can't even read them. They're coming in so fast now.
I know, this is great. Cool, keep them coming. Segments based on job function to target messaging for potential event attendees. Okay, cool, yeah. Based on like title. Legacy donors who have included our organization in their estate plans. Interesting.
Very hyper targeted there.
Yeah, probably big ticket.
Yep, yep.
Awesome. Well, keep dropping them in. These are all great.
Yeah.
Get into some warm audience examples here.
Okay, so I'm actually surprised that no one said donation dropout, because that was my first example. If I were a betting man, which I'm not, I would bet on this campaign to be the one that converts with a good CPA. So here I have a donation dropout audience. You can see it's about 10,000 people for Hope in the Future. What I'm doing is I would also recommend always including that exclusion segment to make sure that we don't serve ads to people for 90 days after they enter the segment, just as a way to protect your donors. Here, I'm also looking if a campaign exists. I wanted to look back for Hope in the Future and see how much of the marketing funnel was being influenced by a Feather ad. And here, if a campaign exists, that means that an ad was either shown to them, they clicked on an ad, they saw an email, received an email. We're actually influencing around 33% of their marketing funnel with this campaign, which is a great indication of warmness. So they're going there, plus they're warm from ads. Looking at full website within the past 30 days, and they've been seen more than 10 times. Remember, I showed you guys that audience of people who were cold earlier with the first example of that million cookie pool. Here you have a past 30 days, but only been seen over 10 times, and that shrinks that audience to around 2 grand. So it's about 10% of that cold website audience. But very similar, just one different modifier. And that should be much warmer people that are probably much more likely to take the next action. I also like adding ad activity. If someone clicked on an ad, that for me is an automatic response that I want to add them to a next step of a funnel. So if you clicked on an ad and then also clicked the link on a page, that's 2 steps. And marketing is about taking steps. So the first step, click the ad. Next step, click the link on the website. Hopefully that next step is getting to the donation form. And then that 4th step is converting. Each time there's a step, there's like a 50 to 90% fall off. So if these people can take 2 steps, these 411 people out of 1 million, that's super, super warm in the last 120 days. Okay, so this is another example of email existing and de-anonymizing cookies and doing all those things. So if your email exists in Feather, here I'm not really using third-party cookies here. So this is why I include this example. So if email exists in Feather, plus the activity type is click link on page, you have a very warm audience of around 300 people. This is for a new client of mine, Playhouse on the Square. Shout out to Playhouse on the Square.
Yeah, so I wanted to include another warm audience example, but mainly just to show you guys how easy it is to create a new segment in Feather based on filters. So this example is from Quad City Symphony Orchestra. They're another great customer. They do amazing segmentation and have seen great results for their orchestra, the shows that they put on. So really, really good turnout at events because they get super targeted in their email lists and their ad campaigns. And so, for example, last year, this user was promoting A Nightmare Before Christmas and concert show, and she used data from her Beauty and the Beast and Harry Potter shows to kind of see, okay, like this is all going to be nostalgic for millennials. Let me see who attended those previous shows and target them with personalized messaging for this Nightmare Before Christmas show, because I know that this will probably appeal to them on a similar level as those did. And so she was able to kind of use a lot of the data from those previous events to inform her marketing and segmentation for future events. So she's really good at doing that and getting super creative with filters and segments. So I just wanted to show this view of the app. This is not actually a segment that they've used. They do a lot of similar segmentation, much better than what I have here too. But I just built this to show sort of how straightforward it is to select these filters and this look back date. So as you can see here, this is people who have visited the QCSO events page since between now and April 1st, so in the last 2 months, and they've seen it more than 6 times. So you can easily just select these filters, and then down here, you can hit Save as Group, and Feather will automatically turn this into a new segment that you can use in future campaigns. So this might be just a high intent group that you're like, okay, these people are clearly interested in attending our events. Let's speak to that when we message them. Versus somebody who's never been to your events page, obviously you're going to speak to them in a different way. And then this is the example that I referenced earlier, which brings in that conversations tool that Feather offers. So this is basically the ability to create website pop-up surveys to get more information from your website visitors on what they're looking for, what motivates them, what they're interested in. And you can customize them to fit your branding, select whatever language you want to use, whatever question you want to ask, and all of that stuff when the survey appears. And then yeah, you can keep them pretty simple, but they can provide really helpful, first-party insights from the people themselves on what they're looking for, and you can then use that information to get more segmented. And so in this example, this food bank wanted to understand what motivated their volunteers and potential volunteers to give time. So you can see here that the campaign name was Volunteer Purpose, and it was the volunteer page is where this survey populated. And then what's your favorite part of volunteering was the question. And then there were several options, which I'll show in the next slide. And so people could just select one of the options. And then, so real quick, they got lots of responses for this, great engagement rate. So they had 6,500 responses. It was shown to almost 29,000 people. So it's a pretty good response rate. And then here I've just pulled the segments that they created from those responses. So hopefully you guys can see this. I know it's kind of small, but the options for the question were, so why do you want to volunteer? Some people said it's fun. Some people said I'm looking to meet new people. Some said it gives me a sense of purpose. And then others said helping my community is the main goal. So they ran this pop-up, super easy, created these 4 segments based on the responses. And then she was able to use this information in the ad and email campaigns she ran after to speak directly to those things that people themselves told her they were interested in. So this is a really powerful way to just get information straight from people about what they want and feed it right back to them. And then I included this quote just because I think it's really powerful. This is Katie from the food bank that we just looked at. This is what she has to say about conversation. So she calls it the unsung hero of Feather. She says, I always talk about it. It's my favorite because it's so simple to set up and use. My favorite conversation campaign that we did was on one of our landing pages, and all I wanted to do was think through email campaign themes to attract volunteers. So the question was, what does food mean to you? We got some really good information on the kinds of things that resonated with people, and more than anything, I wanted people to think about the significance of food. So I think answering that question probably put them one step closer to hearing about our mission, regardless of how they turned up on that page. So she's obviously run a few different surveys to volunteers and potential volunteers asking different questions. So one of them was what motivates you, and then this one was just, what does food mean to you? So I think this is a really creative way to just kind of get people thinking about food and the importance of it and community, and a good way to just engage people and kind of pull them in and also get that information on what speaks to them. And so you can use that to get more specific when you talk to them. So
I love this example because it's about crowdsourcing content, and everybody wants to be heard. And I think, like, so many times communication is a one-way street with organizations, and the more that we can get our community to be talking back to us, the better our marketing is going to work in general. So I love this piece. I'm going to be using conversations a lot more in all of my flight plans moving forward. So
yeah.
Thanks for sharing this, Isa.
Yeah, every time I talk to her, I remember, like, it's such a great tool, and I do think it's underutilized, but it's really powerful. It's so simple to use. And so, yeah. Well, that wraps up our content. If there's any more questions, feel free to drop those in since we still have a couple more minutes. Quick note. So if you are not a Feather user, but you liked what you saw today, you're interested in learning more about things like this conversations tool, Feather segmentation features, how you can use Feather to run multi-channel campaigns, please drop a 1 in the chat if you'd like a more personalized walkthrough. You can feel free to bring any team members to that conversation and we'll get your questions answered. So drop a 1 in the chat if you liked this and you want to learn more. And then if you are a Feather user and you would like to speak directly with your customer success manager about segmentation, look through any of your campaigns that you're working on, drop a 2 in the chat. So if you're not a Feather user, but you want to learn more, drop a 1. And then if you are a Feather user and you would just like to connect with your CSM, we can hook that up, drop a 2.
That's some good questions. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes for a few more to trickle in.
Cool.
Chris, I'll go ahead and answer yours. Conversations, it'll be in the bottom section. If you go to create a new campaign, it's right next to tracked links, I believe. Let me just confirm that real quick. Yep, it's underneath understand by tracked link. There's a landing page and conversations, the blue dot. Jeremy, great question. What is the most important info to capture in our CRM to aid in segmentation? I love location. For me, it's all about location. If I can have an email list that has like where your donors are located, it allows me to understand where I need to spend the ad spend. Other things is like lifetime donor amounts. If I'm getting a list of lifetime donor amounts, I know to either include or exclude these people based on how much they donate, frequency of donation, things like that.
Yeah, I think frequency is a big one too, because like just because someone isn't able to give huge amounts doesn't mean they can't be a loyal recurring donor, you know? So somebody who maybe has less to give, but they're giving consistently, that's worth noting too.
Yeah, and it's always a challenge because, you know, when you're asking for a donation, you want to keep your form fills simple. And if you add too many fields, sometimes like you'll see a drop off. So it is a balancing act, to say the least. Denise, thank you for the question. Should full site retargeting exclude audiences from additional site retargeting campaigns? Yes. The best use case that I do is my full website retargeting will exclude any other additional retargeting campaigns that are lower in the funnel. So you would exclude the high intent audiences. And then in a perfect world, your ads will be different. So that way, as people organically move through that marketing funnel, the ads will change until they hopefully convert.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining.